Hi, I'm Joshua, and I'm an INTP. And first and foremost, I would like to say thank you for viewing this video. Some preliminary words is that I am recording all of these videos from my phone. And I do not own a video recording set of any device or of any kind. I don't have a microphone or anything like that. So this is just a projection of my voice. And quite honestly, given the budget that I have and the fact that I live on my own, this is the best production quality I can come up with at this point. And I can understand how one as a viewer or a listener may be frustrated with the quality of the videos, but I'm not at the power nor the liberty at this moment, given my financial station, to do anything about this fact. So I ask that either you bear with me in this journey of me continuing to learn about the production of videos and making videos, and in the future, hopefully near future, when I'm able to acquire better equipment to film videos, then you can share and jubilee with me in that moment. But if that's not something that you are willing to do and don't value the content of these videos over the quality of them, then I have to say that I would ask for you to politely just ignore and part from the viewing of my videos and unsubscribe from my channel, because you are consistently asking me to do things and to create a production that I'm quite honestly unable to do. And the only thing I can offer the world right now is the content and not the production value. So with that said, I would like to get into the topic of this video. And the topic of this video will be speculation on human cognition. And the reason I call it speculation on human cognition is because there is not a great deal of empirical research out there on the development and the evolution of human cognition. Primarily in the development and the evolution of knowledge, structures, and the creative mind, and so many different anthropological questions that exist. Mostly what's out there is speculation, because it's not as if we can come to the beginning emphatically, and all of the best data we have on man's evolution is by way of the human genome and what we've been able to map out. But and what we've been able to study from lower order species and their neurological substrates and their neural anatomical structure in comparison to our own, and sort of mapping things in correspondence with one another. But on the more qualitative, and I don't really think that they're qualitative, but I would say more fuzzy and gray issues, such as how did we first start developing tools, and why, really the why questions of what goes on in human cognition and what we're seeing now. There's not a lot of experimentation on that, and there's a great deal of thought. And so I would just like to lend my thoughts, because I was reading a book that raised a great deal of questions, and I thought that they were good questions, but I think where the author was going was incorrect, because they were making some 21st century assumptions, I think, in terms of human cognition. So there are consistent patterns in cognition across culture when you rip them apart, essentially, and look at them at their bare structure. And it's essentially that people have the capacity for emotional responsiveness to the environment, pattern seeking in the environment, play, exploration, and sex. So, and more than that, but in terms of biological drives and our need for play, being exploratory and noticing patterns. Language obviously is a pertinent capacity, but I'm not going to really focus on the picture of language because I want to make a speculative argument, but a speculative argument on why I don't think that most of what we have in history is by way of breakthroughs, and how breakthroughs and thoughts are recent human developments. And I don't think it's just one individual who decided to start making fire, and that's how we got fire, or somebody noticed that you could do this with a stone or something, and that's how we got tools. I don't think that most things came out of will and volition when it came to people, at least in our early history. I think that the event of serendipity, or just spontaneity, rather chance and circumstance led way to many things rather than just pure human ingenuity. But it was our ingenuity to create culture and reverberate and repeat the ideas and the processes and the findings we did come up with. So first, I'll say this, that if the brain is good at anything, it is being a dual processing system, and that is its ability to compare things it's seeing with what it already knows. And the brain is better at focusing on one thing over a long series of time and establishing a system or a basis for a comparison of other things based on what it's stared at for a long time. So staring and seeing things over and over and over and over again tends to lead us towards lackadaisicalness, laziness, mastery, and understanding. So the points I would focus on in this is saying that mastery and understanding is, I think, where most of human innovation comes from, obviously, but not in the more obvious manners that it is now. And what I mean is this, is that people, when we first emerged in the savannas, we were out in a wilderness, and we were dealing with threats and a lot of unknown items of salience, and we had to wade through the waters, essentially, and pick out what was important and remember things. And so human memory is not that great. So it seems what the brain does to shortcut the fact that memory is not that great, at least short-term memory is not that great, or working memory isn't that great, though working memory is not explicitly short-term memory, but working memory is not that great, that it gave the subconscious mind and the pattern-seeking piece of the brain a higher importance in the aggregation of knowledge and the finding of knowledge. And I think it's so instinctual and fundamental to our understanding of things that we have developed entire fields such as mathematics and science predicated essentially on pattern recognition and pattern testing. And so I think what people did is that they were out in an environment and they watched things, and they connected the things that they watched to see that certain things repeat themselves with other phenomenon, that you get events to occur when other things happen. I think that some pieces of mythology or some pieces of belief are pattern, or from our base nature to seek patterns, that you ascribe qualities and elements to inanimate things, because we are naturally things that like to search out patterns and use patterns for explanations of things, and thinking that patterns work for explaining the reason why for something rather than other things. We didn't introduce empiricism until much later, much long later in our cognitive evolution. Before we before doing it with the patterns, we used the patterns first, and it's the patterns that got us somewhere. So my speculation is that most rudimentary forms of knowledge came by way of us watching things in the environment over time and seeing connections here and seeing connections there, and those things slowly coming together to tacitous pieces of knowledge that were not verbal or linguistic, but were in some ways procedural by way of us watching one another and imitating the patterns that we observed in nature, and then having the articulate and procedural, well, I said they were procedural, but articulated procedural forms of knowledge much later. We were concerned with repeating things, but things were repeating themselves out in the world, and we were watching things repeat themselves out in the world before we got a sense of how we should do and what we should be. I think that pattern recognition, and particularly our ability to imitate things and to, by way of abstraction, I think that pattern recognition is the abstract faculty of our brain, and is kind of the base abstract faculty of our brain. And this is speculation, because I don't have, you're not going to find this in a journal, but the base structures of our ability to abstract, because we can then watch how wolves hunt and watch them for long enough, or watch how a herd of gazelle migrate, or buffalo, or whatever it is people hunted, or mammoths, and watch how they migrated and what they did periodically and consistently, and then begin to sort of point and match our behaviors to dealing with whatever it is they're doing, or taking whatever it is that they're doing that's most salient to our survival and meeting our goals. Because I think at the base level, the dopaminergic systems are responsible for goal-orientated behavior and doing action. So it was essentially pattern recognition ability and dopamine that gets our first kick into forming knowledge structures, or at least determining how we ought to act and the right procedures to act out on an animal or an object in the environment, and sort of our base reactions. I think by way of this and our natural base reactions, so people tend to not like snakes, though that's changed over the years. There seems to be more of an innate fear in snakes, because it seemed that predatory reptiles were a part of our early evolutionary history with our common ancestors with chimpanzees. And Lynn Isabel, a researcher, noticed that primate vision improved and had a direct correlation with the number of predatory reptiles within their environment, and this pattern has been consistently demonstrated, that at some point in time we were essentially at animosity with reptiles way long ago in our evolutionary history. They were trying to eat us and kill us, and I think that that's why reptiles and dragons show up so much in our mythology as enemies per se, and even why Chinese culture has reverence and respect for dragons or predatory reptiles in a sense, because that which can kill you could be considered as divine or God, something to be feared, maybe not something to hate, but something to be feared in a natural sense. So you get the things that you see now. But the reason I mentioned that is that we do have these sort of base packages that we come with, by way of our evolutionary history, and we do have this strange ability to recognize patterns, and even dogs have it. It seems primitive to some extent to be habitual, and habitation and pattern recognition have some correlation. It is our ability, so in Pavlov's dogs, it's their ability to recognize this happens, I get this, consistently, so long as it repeats itself in the environment over time. I store that as salient, important, and use that information that I store as salient and important because it helps me get to my goals by way of my own natural biological drives, and superimposing that on my other biological structures, that I get the inclination to seek out patterns. And I think that you get really the basis of knowledge from habituation and pattern structures more than anything else. I think that that's why we have grammar and syntax and all the other forms of things. It comes from just the base root of habituation and pattern structures, which seems to be in a lot of other mammals and mammalian entities. They can do a base addition of 2 plus 2 equals 4 if I've seen it enough. And what I mean is this: if I wait, like you watch cats, they see the gopher's head pop in and out of its hole, and they watch it. And most predatory animals do that. We sit around and we watch things in our environment, and we watch how they go consistently, and we make sure we use that information to get what we want. So the cat watches the gopher pop its head up and out of its hole consistently, so the cat just knows, be kind of quiet, don't breathe too hard, actually hold my breath for a few minutes, and wait for the gopher, be behind the gopher, and wait for the gopher to pick its head up and be behind it, and then snatch it up when it pulled its head out, picks its head up from behind. And that's how I'll get my meal. And crocodiles do something similar when droughts happen and animals tend to have to migrate to certain watering holes in the African savanna. Crocodiles tend to populate that area more so than they did in earlier parts of the year. One, because there's a drought and they need to be near water, and two, they know that all the food is coming here, and all the food consistently comes here, and grizzlies do the same thing with salmon, and they know it's just patterns, and habituation is the main crux and basis for knowledge, and where I think people get most things. We watch them happen, or we watch some salient corollary action happen, and we were able to keep that thing and extrapolate it and move it up the chains of abstraction as we developed with our cognition and our culture and ability to verbalize things and act out certain patterns and rituals. I think the process of acting out patterns, has a lot to do with our knowledge and its structure, insofar as knowledge seems to come from the body in a lot of ways in our evolutionary history. I think that's why in tribes they would dress as other animals and act out, I am the wolf, or I'm soaring like the eagle, and these things would have significance and meaning to them because they do things and they mean things consistently, and we viewed them to have this consistent pattern so that it can rest as a standard because it is fixed enough in our own conscious to be that. So patterns as the first basis, and then just as salient as is important, play and exploration as the other. So people, I think that we're pretty lazy by design, and this may have to be a part 2 because I'm looking at the time in my video, and it may cut me short because I'm running low on storage space. But we're pretty lazy, so we like to sleep. I think most animals, before we found light and fire and industry and things like that, I think we were like most animals, and we slept in the early mornings, and we had different times where people would be up late at night. There's different reasons for that, and so far that we have genes for being night owls or versus being early birds. But it seems like that people, there is a good time where we were just restful and sedentary, and we conserved our energy. And when we weren't doing things, and the herds and the we were being nomadic, it seems like a trait that most animals and most mammals have. Whether you're looking at chimps, whether you're looking at bears, whether you're looking at cats, that the hypothalamus is concerned with exploration and being hyper-exploratory in the environment. It seems like a big portion of the brain, or the top part of the brain, is for remembering things and storing things roughly and essentially, and sorting through what's been remembered and stored. But the hypothalamus is just trying to get us out there to eat, to mate, and to see what's going on, because the default mode, it seems to be like, for a mammal is to be playful and exploratory, roughly. Not like getting a tennis ball or just, well, cats will just sit there and mess with things. We mess with things to learn things, and it's almost like that's why baby animals or very young animals play and rummage around, because they teach themselves and they learn essentially how to fit themselves in their body, and having a model of space and how things work in space-time, essentially, from crawling and roughhousing and things like that. You wouldn't know that that's what they're doing. It's really damn hard to get a computer to learn how to do those things, so we kind of take it for granted how easily we do it, but we do it, and the basis for it is exploration and play. So I think that people have the ability to recognize patterns, and people just essentially mess with things, notice things, move things around, because they got nothing better to do, or there's no imminent threat, and there's no mating partners around. So, or I'm searching for mating partners, or I'm searching for this, or I'm searching for that, and in my search for this, or that, or the other, I mess with something, because people recognize symmetry for some odd reason. We like symmetry. I think it's part of our schema for pattern recognition, but we like symmetry, we like certain colors, we like things, and I don't know if those came there by way of history, or that they were extant much later on in our cognitive history, because we are evolved things, and we have things that are wired in us that are just the same wired in a fish, a lobster, or a lizard, which is so crazy to me. So I don't know if they come from the fish, the lobster, or the lizard existence, but they're in there nonetheless, and I think that you just have these base little schematizations that sort of drive us someplace. You have our ability to see symmetry, and our ability, or our like for symmetry, and our ability to see patterns, and we can mess with things. That can cause a great deal for a thinking animal. Essentially, that's what people are. There is a great deal of things to come from that, but it's a slow aggregation. I don't think we suddenly got things. I think that what most likely happened was that if we were in regions where rocks fell and erosion happens, you know, that can happen anywhere. A person saw that there were rocks that were different than the other rocks because nature had worked on them, essentially, or they had fallen and cracked on one another. They picked it up and they touched it because we were exploratory, and at some point it was jagged enough, and they cut themselves, and they saw themselves bleed, and they recognized pain, but we have this ability to sort of invert whatever happens to us and speculate about it and inflict it on another. So it may have been that they attacked another person or they attacked an animal with this instrument, but they realized that they could hurt things with this instrument because they could hurt themselves. So we can hurt ourselves so we can hurt other things. I think that that's how it went. And through that, it got repeated and better over time, and you get tools and weapons. But I don't think tools come because, we need tools. Because chimpanzees make rudimentary forms of tools, and I think we did the same thing. We just go around in our environment, picking up things, playing with things, tossing things, and noticing they have equitable and good results to them, to our ends. And so we continue to do them and mess around with them and play with them, and then something interesting happens that's associated out in the environment with what we already know. And we just stack we just stack that new and interesting thing that's salient to us onto what we already know, and do that over time, and we get knowledge, essentially. And so human cognition is not something, to me, of an immediacy, but a very slow process that hit an exponential growth after agriculture. Because pre-agriculture, I don't think that human cognition was necessarily what it is now. And a lot of times researchers ask, what was the primitive creative person like? I don't think that there was a such thing as the dichotomy between creativity and normal knowledge. I think it was all namely pattern recognition and stacking what was innate, biological, and already known with what the environment showed and what we could over time make procedural and static. But things for a very long time, and it's in most mythologies, in most religion, that there was a deep understanding about what was known and what was unknown, and that people had a space for what was known and what was unknown, more so than the modern person does, because, hell, they're living in a very different environment than what we're living in right now. But I don't think people necessarily knew. And I don't think that most inventions that happen in the ancient world happened because somebody was deliberately trying to get that result. I think deliberation was something that came later, and deliberation mostly centered around our natural drives. And I think even the way in which we understand abstraction now comes from our biological drives. And I mean something like this. How do you get abstractions in the way that we understand them, a representation of something that can be extended across time and context? How do you get that when you're a Homo sapien who has to pay a great deal of attention to the environment, and if you don't, it'll kill you? Because a lot of abstraction happens when we have the ability to be down-regulated, essentially, or at least creativity, and creating these epistemological structures that we call abstractions. And I think of a little something like this. So you have two brothers. This is always a thought experiment I run people through. You have two brothers. They're hunter-gatherers. They roam. I don't think men roamed in great coalitions. I think that they were very much small coalitions, and women roamed in larger coalitions, and then got men to come to their larger groups because men wanted sex. That's a theory. It's a speculation I have. I can't say it's a theory, but that's a theory, a speculation I have. But I think men. So you got two brothers, anyways. You have two brothers, and they're rummaging around, and they're doing whatever. And so one brother sends the other brother out to get water, or to go see if there's water in the freshwater stream, because people tend to hang in the same area. I don't think habits, like, I think people are habitual then. Like, what got us to leave Africa, it seems like, was near extinction. So I think that if we don't damn near die, we don't move and we don't migrate, because we like to be sedentary, essentially. Because we're like all other animals. And how many people do you know that have lived in the same town for the rest of their lives and have never been outside of it? And how many people do you know live in the United States and have never left the United States? Or how many people do you know in the Middle East have lived in the Middle East and will live in the Middle East for the rest of their lives and have never left it? Just, we like to be sedentary. I think there's enough evidence to say that we like to be sedentary. So anyways, they know there's a stream there. So one day the brother goes to the stream to get water or whatever he's doing there to see if the tide's high or whatever's salient or important to our needs. Because we like to camp around water. Because it's important, we found out. I think we always knew. But anyways, he's going towards the water. Now one day he goes to the watering hole, and he notices there's a whole batch of women there, and they're bathing, and he thinks, holy crap, like, here's the goods, like, because they were probably all running around naked and stuff, like, so he knew, they didn't look like, whatever, but anyways, here's the goods, and here's what we want, brother, here's what we want, and he scares the women off, but anyways, he notices that this stream is important, but there's all these other streams around, so how is he going to denote this stream? Because he goes again and he sees later on that the women are there, and he goes another time and he sees the women are there. So you notice women show up to this place, this watering hole. So if we're around this watering hole, or make it ours somehow, we got a better chance of getting laid, essentially. So how do I denote this? And he goes to talk to his brother and he tells him about the stream. Well, what was the stream? Where is the stream? What was different about the stream versus all the other streams we know? The red rock. It had a red rock in it. So, the stream, the red rock. The stream with the red rock in it. That's the stream where they all go to bathe. The one with the red rock. Okay, so we'll go to the stream with the red rock. And so, they get some women or something from the red rock, and they have kids. And then they say, we met them at the red rock. To their children or whatever, or they communicate that somehow. Or son, if you're looking for women, go to the red rock. And the red rock, as they move and they go on in their culture, the red rock will start to be decontextualized. It'll go from that specific stream and that place to being another stream in another place that women are. So we'll go to the red rock. That may not have a red rock in it, but we know that the red rock, from our own experiences and what's been taught to us, means this. Then it goes from being in a stream where there's a tree that women hang out around, or there's this town or something. We're moving up the strata in time, essentially, but that's the red rock. Like, not just assuming these people haven't died off. And eventually, the bar is like the red rock. Just the place to go to find women to get laid, essentially. And red rock's going to get associated with that. And then when abstraction gets even more complex, and you make mythology, the red rock is now the place where one goes to find Mother Nature, or to be confronted with the feminine and be given powers or something. All of the other things, that the more abstract things, which is later on in human history, will now be associated with the red rock or red rock. And red rock will stand now for something really, one could say, esoteric. But it starts out as a very highly contextualized thing that is only predicated and relevant by way of our base primal desires and needs, essentially. And I think that's how all things started with people. We became something sacred over time, but it didn't really start that way, and it was a very slow process. And that's just a overview of what I think of human cognition and its evolutionary development, so far as in us being Homo sapiens, and when Homo sapiens emerge, Homo habilis and Homo erectus and Neanderthal, essentially, and us, and the collection. That's the rough story, and that's what got us at least to agriculture. And agriculture would be a different story, and I'll tell a different story about agriculture at another time. But that's my speculations on the evolution of human cognition. I hope you found it at least interesting. Thank you for watching the video.